welcome back. And we are here with our special guest, KevinHaney. Let's see, we were talking about New York and Saturday Night Live and all the experiences. Do you have a special story that you can recall that really stands out above all other stories while working on Saturday Night Live?
Well, there's a couple, but the hardest
something
thing,
you can quote.
Well, I can quote it. The hardest one was we did a makeup on Eddie Murphy.
Yes.
He was playing Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
And we did a pre-tape of Joe as the sports guy,
yes,
talking to Cassius Clay and doing an interview, and then they did a cut to a tape of Eddie as Muhammad Ali. And I designed a makeup to go on Eddie that had to be done in 3 minutes.
Oh my God.
Side of the face pieces, nose and lip, and it had to go on in 3 minutes. My assistant at the time, Ann Belsky. It was one of those things I'd read about Dick Smith doing Claire Bloom's changes on,
yes, on stage.
Queen Elizabeth,
yes,
on television, on live TV.
Yes, yes.
And I was trying to follow in those footsteps, but we pulled it off. And there were a lot of people to this day that, you know, a lot of friends of Eddie and stuff that would go, you know, how did they get that? How did they get Muhammad Ali to do that segment? I said, no, that was me. You know, so that was probably.
You want to tell us how you did it?
Well, it was easy. We pre-glued. I mean, I had the foam latex pieces. We pre-glued them. We pre-colored them.
What were you using as an adhesive?
I believe at the time we were using Prozade.
Prozade.
Which I think the only reason I knew to use Prozade was because Michael Adati had. I had used it on, or maybe I did it. Oh God, maybe I did it with 355 and just. I did it with 355 because I didn't know I could use Prozade on.
Now we're Telesis.
Well, now it's Telesis, yes, but at that time it was 355, right, and I believe that I painted it and we just stripped it and put it on. But I didn't even know we could use Prozade until Michael Adati. I was using it for gelatin. Didn't know you could use it on foam latex.
Oh, absolutely.
Until Michael Adati went off and did an LBJ makeup for me and said, "Oh, I use Prozade as a contact." I went,
right.
Wow, that's never even thought of doing it that way. And of course now that's the way everybody does it for the most part. But
well, the adhesives that you're using today, what's your favorite adhesive? Can you, without, I mean.
I use for silicone I use Telesis.
That's number 5, is it? Or,
yeah, I think that's all that's
all that's
left now.
Number 5.
And for foam latex appliances like the Bush makeup that I do,
we're going to talk more. We're going to talk about that in a second.
I use Betamon Plus.
I see. Excellent. So you're in New York. You're having a tremendous amount of fun. You're learning a lot.
Doing commercials.
So it's more than NBC.
It's more than NBC. They allow you to freelance.
Right.
And you were able to go out, and I was able to do, at that point, they used a lot of makeup in commercials. Now they're using a lot of CG.
Yes.
But in those days, you could do 3 or 4 commercials.
Yes.
And it was great. I did an early Burger King commercial, and you know, growing noses and all kinds of effects and all kinds of stuff.
Let's see, where was I going with this? Hollywood. Now, how did you make the transition from New York to Hollywood? Think about that. Go ahead. Go with it. Well, how did you make that transition? Because
it started.
Here you are. You made the transition to New York, and you're very successful in New York. Wasn't it a chance that you were taking to go from New York to Hollywood? Because you were so successful. There you are. You're in a major network. You're at NBC, very successful. What could possibly pull you away from that?
Well, it's an interesting way that it happened. Joe Piscopo, would shoot his TV specials in Hollywood. So we'd be doing all this prosthetic work in Hollywood. And, you know, it wasn't under the auspices of the union, obviously, but it enabled me to see what Hollywood was like, what it was like to do prosthetics, you know, in Hollywood. It was actually John Caglione who brought me out to help him with Dick Tracy. And again, it's like circumstances. Stéphane Dupuis was originally working on it, and his mother became ill, and he had to leave the show, and then they called me in. But I had just happened to be working on a commercial at the time, and he invited me over to look at the sketches that he and Doug had done. And I was like, wow, this is going to be really fun for you guys. I wish I could be involved, but of course I can't because I'm in New York and you're out here. But eventually I did end up on Dick Tracy, helping with the sculptures and some on-set work and a lot of supervision.
Well, you were in charge of all the character makeup, weren't you?
No, that's not entirely true. John and Doug spearheaded it. By myself, I couldn't have done Dick Tracy. It was John and Doug's. You know,
V. Neal was involved. V
was set point person. I mean, V was responsible for implementing John and Doug's dictates on set.
I see.
And you know, and you had in the regular makeup department, you had Sherry Menz, and we had Richard Dean doing Madonna, and it just was, you know, Leonard Engelman came in to do Mandy Patinkin. It was just crazy. But I would call myself a supervisor. I basically would take John's maquettes, and because I wasn't there for the maquette period, and try to translate those into the prosthetics, and how I determined how they would be broken down. With John, you know, John and I were both a proponent of don't do it all in one mask, break it up into pieces. John and Doug let me do flat top, and flat top was basically me running with it. Although they applied it. Yeah, wonderful. I mean, a wonderful opportunity. But, you know, it ended up being a relationship where, with the exception of Flat Top and some of the background characters, John would, like, sketch out half a prune face. And then I'd match it. I'd do this side and add the textural stuff that I love to do. The same thing with Big Boy. John would sculpt it. And then say, now you take it and you help mold it and maybe do the texturing. And I think that was out of talking with Carl Fullerton. I mean, how it all goes into circles. Carl would put bumps on a sculpture with acrylic medium on some torso piece that he had done. And we went crazy with bumps on Dick Tracy. And I've found easier ways to do it now, but that was the first time where you look at a life cast and you see that it's not just sculpted wrinkles and everything, that there's a raised element that is hard to sculpt, and everybody's got different ways of doing it, from Mitch Devane to, you know.
Mitch is one of my graduates. I believe he was one of my graduates.
Mitch is an outstanding sculptor.
Amazing?
I mean, his stuff is like scary.
Okay, let's carry on here. We went from New York to Hollywood, and
how I got to Hollywood is where we were going. It started with Joe Piscopo, who would shoot his specials out here. Then the other time I came out was Dave Thomas through Martin Short, shot his TV show out here, and then on Dick Tracy, John brought me out. I got my card. And then Fern Buckner brought me out to work on Addams Family. And that's when I moved. That's when I made the move.
Now, what did you do? Now, Addams Family, what did you do on Addams Family?
Well, on the first one, everything had already been set up, and I was responsible for doing the Fester makeup and doing the Granny makeup. So on Judith Molina, and the Fester makeup on Christopher Lloyd. When we did the second one, they hired me as department head. Fern just did Angelica, and I was responsible for everybody else. We got Sherry Menz to do Joan Cusack. We had Dr. Zamata make her some excellent veneers and beautiful, beautiful makeup. And Judith Molina was replaced by Carol Kane. And we did a very complicated makeup on Carol Kane for that. And we also had to design makeup on a baby on Pubert. And Fred Blau did Christopher Lloyd. So the Addams Family sort of got me out here and started it. It was a turning point.
That was a turning point in your career. And then from that point, I believe, let's see, you went on to, I know that Amityville.
No, Amityville 3D was in New York.
Oh,
no, earlier. And that was John.
That was actually earlier. Huh?
Yeah, and that was when John had a relationship with De Laurentiis. And Amityville 3D. John was supposed to do a lot of work on Dune as well. But no, I did. I've been lucky. I mean, John was doing a lot of features in New York,
Yes.
and I would work with John,
With him.
and I could work on a prestigious project
Right.
without a lot of the responsibility of actually running it.
Yes.
John was very good.
It's a tremendous apprenticeship program.
It
incredible.
was, and it's not really. It's interesting because when you say apprenticeship, it was not a.
You weren't,
It wasn't.
you
It
weren't
wasn't
there as an
associated.
apprentice,
No, it wasn't associated with NBC.
Yeah.
I would take leaves of absence at NBC
Yes.
and go work for Carl
Yes.
and John,
Yes.
and I could get away with it because there weren't at that point. Believe it or not, there was a makeup shortage. There
Yeah.
weren't that many people
Yes.
doing makeup. In fact, before. John, myself, and Carl, Dick was actually concerned that there would be a shortage, that makeup would be a dying art. Little did he know.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: in Chud, CHUD.
Yes.
Okay.
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
Yes, I'm glad you said it. You did the animatronics.
I was trying to do a Rob Bottin for John.
Yes.
Yeah. John designed.
Tell us about that.
Well, John designed the
How did you go from
creature.
into the animatronics?
Well, animatronics was what everybody was doing. I
Right.
mean, Carl was doing quite a bit of
So where did you pick
mechanical
this
heads
up?
and stuff.
Did you learned from Carl?
That's a good question. How did we do it? There were certain articles in Cinefantastique about simple,
Mechanic.
Well,
armatures.
it's interesting because I think it came out of I was a member of the Puppeteers of America when I was a kid. That puppetry, it's like puppetry,
Yes.
artistry, but puppetry was a big component of what I wanted to do. I think by the time we were doing Chud, I had worked with Dick, and Dick had done some animatronics as well. So I had a basic knowledge of it between Dick and Carl. But what we ended up doing was John did the sculpture, we had the molds. We were trying to make Skin Flex, which was a smooth-on product at the time, highly plasticized. And we had these stretching and moving creatures,
Yes.
and it was basically the principle was a fiberglass shell
Yes.
with bicycle cables,
Yes,
and
yes.
within that
Push-pull
you would
cables, yeah.
you could push pull and make it work.
Right.
And in the case of the stretching head, we actually just I think it was literally a pole that
Yes.
just moved out of the shell.
So much of that these days, if not
Is
most of
CGI.
it, is all CGI. Now we
Yeah.
used to have at our school, especially in Orlando, we used to teach all of this, the undercarriage and the armatures
it's
and the push-pull, but it's gone by the wayside.
But there are still instances. For instance, I don't think that if they had to do Chewbacca or
Right,
a Wookiee,
right.
I think when they did the Wookiees on the third Star Trek, they
Right.
did them with mechanical
Right,
skulls
right,
and
exactly.
everything.
I think it almost
there
be-
are still instances
Right,
where
you have to.
You have to.
do it.
But like, for instance, I just saw Hellboy 2 and the Abe Sapien. Right now, they're doing something that Stan Winston was so good at
Yes.
creating, which is hybrids
Yes, a
of
mixture,
computer generized imagery and
the makeup
and the
combined,
makeup.
yeah.
So in other words, when you see Abe Sapien, the fish character, it's a prosthetic mask with blinking eyes that are done. At least this is the way it was done in the first one.
Yes.
It's possible that they're doing it mechanically now.
Yes.
It just looks so good that you don't know how they did it.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is is CG now.
Yes. We're going to stop just for a second. And I know you're going to want to be right back. Don't go away.